Thank you all for being here today for a launch of an initiative that I'm quite frankly pumped about. Earlier in my term, it was made clear to me that there were a whole lot of lawyers that were very willing to do a whole lot of work, but there wasn't really the clear direction as to where they would get involved. And so we as the city, I as the mayor, Council President Bender, thank you for being here as well, wanted to make sure that we had an exceedingly clear direction for what our lawyers could do with respect to housing. So today is the product of a whole lot of work from the people up here with me, our staff and our leading law firms. So the law firms that have already committed to this initiative of More Representation Minneapolis include Barnes and Thornburg, Dorsey and Whitney, Faegre Baker Daniels, Fredrickson and Byron, Jones Day, McElstrom, Fargione, Landy, Roravig and Aiken, Merchant and Gould, Robbins Kaplan, Anthony Ostlin Bear and Luagi, Gray Plant Moody, Gray Plant Moody, Stinson and Leonard, and Maslin LLP. So that's 12 law firms in total, and of course the work will be anchored by our friends at VLN and Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid. And so to all of them who are now participating and for all of their work, I want to give them a huge round of applause and thank you. And so most of you have heard me say this before, but we are in the midst of an affordable housing crisis, but our response to the crisis must go beyond increasing access to affordable housing for those that lack it. We have to do more to protect those at risk of losing it, and our housing needs to extend to the people who currently live and pay rent in Minneapolis. So first, let's start with some of the statistics, which to me really help underscore why we need to step up our game when it comes to the courts. According to a study conducted by our innovation team, there are about 3,000 tenant evictions filed every single year. 3,000 tenant evictions filed every single year. And we know that those evictions disproportionately impact people living in low-income and minority neighborhoods. Over 3 years, evictions were filed against nearly half of renter households in North Minneapolis. Evictions were filed for over half of our renter households in North Minneapolis. We also know that people facing eviction aren't on a level playing field with landlords. In fact, fewer than 10% of tenants' evictions have attorneys by their side. Put a different way, 90% of the evictions that happen in our city do not have attorneys assisting the tenants. By the way, 80% of those evictions are facing them for the very first time. A whole lot of those tenants have limited English language proficiency and lack the ability to explain their available legal defenses. In some cases, they are quite literally denied a voice. Preventing evictions and displacement is the right thing to do. It's also the fiscally responsible path for the city and for our taxpayers. Studies show that other legal resources and services are strained by the instability that comes with eviction. New York City estimates that every dollar that they spent on legal services to prevent eviction generates about $5 to $6 in savings. Every $1 spent on assistance in legal services generates $5 to $6 in savings. A Massachusetts study, by the way, found a very similar statistic. So that's more on the macro case, and we know that evictions have a profound and lasting impact on families and the individual. Having just one eviction on your record can make it nearly impossible to find stable and safe housing again. And I know that Council President, working in conjunction with Jeremiah Ellison, are presently working on several initiatives to go through the Council for Tenant Protections as well, and we thank them. Being evicted has also been linked to depression, poor health, and higher levels of stress, side effects of which can persist for years. Representation in those critical moments can help more people avoid that outcome. Studies also show that low-income tenants represented by legal aid attorneys are significantly more likely to prevail in housing court and secure settlements than those who appear in court with no representation. When you talk to people like Gina here with us today, it quickly becomes apparent what a world of difference representation can make. That's what More Representation Minneapolis is all about. When legal aid and Volunteer Lawyers Network approached my office earlier this year, I was committed to having the city take in a more active role. So first, I proposed $150,000 in my 2019 budget for a new eviction representation pilot, which will fund legal services for low-income renters facing imminent displacement from their housing. And that's a good start, but it was clear that we need to do more. A full rollout of that pilot would cost about $1.5 million, would have about 10 to 11 attorneys associated with it, as well as about 5 to 6 additional staff. So what we tried to tackle is knowing firsthand the power of volunteer housing work. I thought we should do more, and so we collaborated. So through this initiative and the commitments by these law firms, and hopefully many, many, many more, VLN is setting out to add 25 additional volunteer lawyers and increase their yearly eviction defense hours by 20%. So again, that's 25 additional volunteer lawyers, increasing yearly eviction defense hours by 20%. That's a staggering figure. So that's a call to action. And if you're an attorney out there who's listening or reading this, please sign on and help us out. That level of commitment would bring their total number of volunteer housing attorneys in 2019 to 310, and their total number of volunteer hours for housing work to 2,300. So thank you so much to Legal Aid and to VLN for your partnership. A big thank you to all the law firms for stepping up to the plate. I want to thank Councilmember Jeremy Schrader as well for joining us. Thank you, Councilmember. Did I miss other council members, by the way, that are here? So they're going to be doing a more full representation housing work, which Tom and Luke will tell you more about here shortly. But here's the bottom line. We have made and are making protecting tenants' rights a cornerstone of an affordable housing agenda here at the city. More representation in Minneapolis is a big step toward making good on that promise. And I'm so excited to be embarking on this journey together. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Tom Walsh, the Executive Director of Volunteer Lawyers Network. Tom, thanks so much for being here today and for your work making this initiative possible. Please.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I'm very proud to be here today and a little bit humbled looking at our partners in justice in the room. With the initiative announced today, the Twin Cities legal community recommits itself to a fair, equitable, and just legal system. A system where everyone has equal access to the protections and privileges provided by the law regardless of their income or ability to pay. For decades, the Volunteer Lawyers Network, our volunteers, and our partner law firms have been working to achieve this vision. During that time, pro bono lawyers have helped more than 10,000 members of this community pursue justice through the courts. Every day at Hennepin County Housing Court, volunteer attorneys help clients facing stressful and potentially life-altering situations navigate the court system and exercise their legal rights. A commitment of funding from the city and the commitment of participation by our law firm partners will result in more families having access to an attorney before going to court. And we cannot ignore the realities of poverty in our city and state. Nearly 80% of our clients are people of color, and we disproportionately deal with problem actors who operate in neighborhoods deeply affected by poverty. This is exploitation of the worst kind. Along with the other equal housing initiatives the city of Minneapolis is pursuing, free legal services are a powerful tool for increasing equity in our city. Safe and stable housing are essential for families, children, and communities to thrive. In today's tight housing market, an eviction can quickly send a family into a downward spiral. The services provided by our volunteers and our partners and colleagues at Legal Aid can make the difference between a family staying in their home or facing the prospect of staying in a shelter or being out on the street. We are proud to continue the tradition of volunteerism and community engagement within the legal community that helps make Minnesota and Minneapolis the place we love to call home. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And next we have Luke Grunman, who's the managing housing attorney with Midwestern Legal Aid. Thank you, Luke, for your work and for your partnership.
Thank you, Mayor Fry. Thanks for having us. Thanks for putting this on. We really appreciate this. This has been a long time coming. Across the plaza, right now, as we speak in housing court, there are 40 families, at least, facing eviction. This is a thing that happens 3 times a week, every single week of every year. These are real people who are really being impacted by a crisis that we have. It's an eviction crisis. It's related to the affordable housing crisis. The two are connected, but it is an eviction crisis. People have nowhere to go. We have a vacancy rate right now of less than 2% in this city. If you have an eviction on your record, it's a lot harder than that to find housing. It is almost impossible. So the folks over there who are facing eviction and have very few attorneys or anyone to help them, they don't have a place to go once they leave. With an eviction on their record, it's extremely difficult to find other housing. We've heard some of the statistics already. 80% of the people we represent are people of color. 85% of those folks are families with children. This is an eviction crisis that disparately impacts people women of color who have children and are trying to make a go of it. These are real people who are suffering. There are laws that currently exist. Minnesota is better than some, worse than others, but we have laws on the books at the State House and the state legislature. There are laws that are currently being written by Council President Bender, Councilmember Ellison, Councilman Schrader. These are things that the city of Minneapolis can do, the state of Minnesota can do to strengthen our laws. But we already have some of those laws. The disconnect is that we can't use the laws that tenants are expected right now in our justice system to somehow take the laws that exist and translate them into a success at court. They have bare minutes to do that. There's one referee over there who's hearing all 40 of those cases right now as we speak. Each person, each family gets just a couple of minutes to try to tell the court, tell the judge, the referee, why they shouldn't be evicted, why those laws that are written for their protection are not, have not been complied with by the landlords who are trying to evict them. This isn't just an eviction crisis. This isn't just an affordable housing crisis. This is a deprivation of constitutional rights. To say to a person that you have these laws and you have these protections, but you can't actually use them, that amounts to a deprivation of something that the Constitution itself protects. And as we already heard, lawyers can really help. The cases that we take, 96% of them are either settled or resolved in the tenant's favor. Most tenants that are represented do not have an eviction on their record when they leave court. The vast majority, in fact, have no eviction record when they walk out of that courtroom. That's huge. I mean, that's an extremely useful thing in order to find housing going forward. So thank you for this. This has been a foundation, a partnership that's a long time coming. We've had a housing court project at the courthouse since the year 2000. It's been a partnership between the Volunteer Lawyers Network and Legal Aid. That's an extremely valuable and somewhat rare thing. There's lots of communities around the country who are thinking about this right to counsel movement or about how to get more tenants representation. But this is what we have as an asset is the fact that this has been a partnership that's been there already for a long time. It's a foundation that I think we can build from. I think that's what we're here to do today. We hope that others will join and that as a united community we say more tenants for lawyers equals better results for everybody and for society. The Pohlad Family Foundation is here too today. They have been generous in this cause and they believe in this cause. Hennepin County has contributed to the cause, particularly Commissioner Marion Green has also been extremely useful in terms of trying to advance the cause of getting more tenants, lawyers, and housing court. So I think if we all work together, we're all here to do that. We won't forget the actual people involved, the families who are at court, and we'll try to get better results for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke, and I'll note that not only is this the right thing to do, not only is it fiscally responsible, it's also an excellent opportunity for young lawyers to get trial experience. The very first trial that I had as a young lawyer was in representing a tenant in an eviction case. And probably through very little due to my own work, we won the case. And it was because it's helpful just to have somebody there that understands the basic defenses and to be able to put the facts into those legal structures. And so thank you, Luke. Next, Clint Connor is a partner at Dorsey Whitney. He's done good pro bono work at Hennepin County Housing Court, and he's going to talk a bit about the work he's done and the impact that volunteer work can make. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Fry. I'm honored to be here. Really appreciate your efforts, and I think it's something the city drastically needs. And I'm very honored to be here on behalf of Dorsey & Whitney. My name is Clint Connor. I'm a partner at Dorsey & Whitney in the Minneapolis office here. I've practiced law for 14 years. I'm an intellectual property lawyer. I also do some work in our cyberspace and data privacy practice group. So what I focus on is patent litigation in federal district courts, which are disputes over inventions. I've got a wife, 3 girls, who are proud Minneapolis public school students. And in addition to the work I do for money, I also do volunteer work at the housing court in Hennepin County. So how this typically works is we will see tenants. We'll usually work with a tenant for 10 minutes, maybe half an hour, and then the tenant will go off on their own and implement our ideas and suggestions on a pro se basis. We have these 2-hour housing clinic shifts, and at any shift, there are many tenants looking for legal advice. And many of their stories are heartbreaking. We just don't have the resources to provide what we call full representation to all of those tenants. However, there are certain instances where a tenant will come to us with a problem, a big problem, and really anything short of full representation just won't do. And so when I identify one of those situations, we will engage the tenant in a full engagement agreement on a pro bono basis after I'm able to determine I can kind of clear my schedule out to deal with it, and then also after we clear conflicts at my law firm. So examples of full representation cases I've taken include one for an upstanding African-American man who was falsely accused of assault of someone from the management office at his apartment complex. He's working 2 jobs, waiting in the lobby of his apartment at 5 a.m. for his ride to work, and something happened, but it surely wasn't assault. So we took that case to trial. The court threw out the case, complete defense victory, and expunged the matter. But you can imagine if that was on somebody's record at the age of 26, what that would mean for their life going forward. In another case, I represented a Section 8 tenant in what's called an Emergency Tenant Remedies Act. And in that matter, the tenant's landlord refused to put the tenant and her 8-year-old asthmatic son in alternative housing while they completed these drastic renovations to remediate a horrible mold problem in their home. And the work that was being done left the apartment partially exposed to the frigid temperatures over the holidays. And so in that case, the court ordered that the landlord put the tenant and her son in a hotel while the landlord was doing the renovations and completed it to the city's satisfaction. In that case, we also were able to preserve the right of the tenant to bring a potential future action for health concerns caused by the mold. And again, her son was asthmatic at 8. We also represented a tenant in a situation after trial. We got a court order that awarded a very large rent abatement award due to extreme mold in the apartment and the fact that the landlord had no license to rent. In that case, we also got attorney's fees. And on a related note, we recently had a team at Dorsey & Whitney that drafted and filed an amicus brief to the Minnesota Supreme Court in a housing case in which we are making the argument that Minnesota law recognizes a retaliation defense in breach of lease eviction cases. So this work is so important. It's so important for me, and the reason it's so important for me is that it's so important to people. We see many people who are on the razor's edge between a warm home and homelessness. And I've seen so many who really are in what I think are no-win situations. People that are struggling just to get to work. They get to work, the work doesn't provide enough to pay the bills, keep the heat on, or even live in substandard housing. Corporate legal work, of course, has its merits. But at Housing Court, we work to protect precious lives, and really there's no more important work than that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. And next, I'm proud to introduce Gina Robinson. Gina is a client representative to VLN's Housing Committee. She has firsthand experience that illustrates how crucial representation can be. Gina.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Gina Robinson. I have lived in Minneapolis for more than 30 years. I'm not a lawyer, but I have had to represent myself in court. It was terrifying, particularly when the other side is represented by a lawyer. And it was exhausting, financially, physically, and emotionally. And it didn't go well for me. My case was ultimately decided in the favor of my landlord, and the effects of the litigation had made it very difficult for me to find and obtain stable housing. I am a mother, a grandmother, a sister, aunt, friend, and neighbor. I've worked at law firms, I put children through school, and struggled through health issues. I have started volunteering with Volunteer Lawyers Network myself because I understand the importance of assisting people who could not otherwise afford a lawyer. Providing tenants with a lawyer not only makes our legal system more fair and provides better outcome for tenants, but it also lessens feelings of hopelessness and despair and decreases the burden of those who already carry heavy burdens. I'm grateful to the volunteers at Volunteer Lawyer Network and pleased that they are working together with Mayor Fry to increase the amount of lawyers available to represent tenants in evictions and repair cases. I believe full representation would have made a difference in my case, and I'd like to help others avoid the situation I had to endure. Thank you, Mayor Fry. Thank you, Volunteer Lawyers Network. Thank you, Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid. I am hopeful all our effects will help many, many others. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina, and thank you for your work. Again, I want to thank all of the partners here that are with us today, and again, I encourage all Twin Cities law firms interested in being part of this initiative to get in touch with VLN by contacting Mariah Kruger, the Housing Resource Attorney and Program Manager at Volunteer Lawyers Network. Mariah, if you could raise your hand as well. She's actually done a ton of work as well getting this set up, and if we could give her a round of applause as well. Thank you, Mariah. And you can do that by dialing 612-752-6647 or emailing Mariah at muria.kruger, Kruger, at vlnmn.org. So again, thank you so much, everyone, for being here.